Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Rossi, Chairman of the Clinton Planning and Zoning Commission. I would like to call this monthly meeting to order. I don't know who's reading the roll. Kathy? Okay, you got to unmute.
You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Michael Rossi,
Here.
Mike Knudsen,
Present.
Ellen Dahlgren. She's not here. Okay. Eddie Alberino,
Here.
Mike Florio. Not here. He had mentioned he wasn't going to be here today. Cinzia Lettieri.
Here.
Okay. Jay Mandel.
Here.
Zach Plord.
Here.
Dylan Walter.
Here.
Bo Clark.
Nope.
Absent. Okay. And Lawrence Edwards.
Here.
Here.
Okay, and
Great.
Lawrence, for Mike Florio. We have a quorum. Okay. Chair's comments, I really don't have a lot. I just will note that we did get a request from town council. And I'll add it to the new business, or we'll talk about a new business, which is looking at the blight ordinance and design standards. So we want to bring that up when we get to new business, just to deal with what they are asking us. Next, minutes. Review and approval of the January 8th, 2020. It should be 24 minutes. Says 23 and I just read, so you know. Were there any comments, questions with the minutes? Okay, hearing none. I'd entertain a motion to approve. Make a motion to approve.
Second it.
Second, thank you. Discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carried. Okay. We don't have a public hearing, so that makes that item go past. With staff reports, I'd like to defer the staff report on the coastal site plan for the town beach basketball court to when we get to new business on that. And the same, I'd like to defer the staff report for section 28 until we get to section 28 and talk about it then. That leaves a staff report for 2024 state legislative session. Abby distributed a memo talking about several of the things that are happening. And to be honest, I found it a little bit confusing myself. So I was hoping Abby would explain things again. Maybe a little, so.
Yep, so every year, we spend time following what the legislature is doing relative to planning, related topics. And so there's a few key themes that have come up over the last couple of years. It's a short session this year, so we don't expect to see a flurry of activity on some of the things like we saw during COVID times, whether it was sort of like a new planning regulation, every sort of a couple of weeks for a while there, especially in 21. But right now, some of the things that have come up as priorities for the various groups who do legislative work at the state level. So this could be CASIO, the Association of Zoning Officials, the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association, the Connecticut Municipal Attorneys and Bar Association. Those groups typically come together and start to put forward some agendas and some priority items to work on. So some of the things that have come up as issues, some may sound minor, but they actually have pretty far-reaching ramifications for folks. So things like the standard for publication of legal notices and how that gets defined. There's actually a Connecticut Supreme Court case running through about notice in the Borough of Fenwick right now. And so we're waiting on the results of that case and also what the results will be relative to legislation. So there is sort of a request to say, should legal notices continue to be posted in the newspaper or should they be online? And whether that's through some kind of central standard clearinghouse or a set of standards in terms of how we post. But there's been a lot of talk about that. Signage, removing the term advertising in the Connecticut enabling legislation for zoning. So that right now, sign standards kind of go toward commercial signs for advertising purposes, and it's a little bit content related. It's a little bit murky in terms of how Connecticut handles its sign regulations and allowances for how we write our regulations differently from how other states do.
This is the one that I found most confusing when I read it.
Yeah, so it's, so it's basically, there's been a history of Supreme Court cases on, sort of what you can and can't regulate relative to content and sort of how you approach that. And so, that also, when you see sort of advertising sign, you're getting into saying you have to be advertising a specific good or product. How does that, how do you define that? It's not well defined in state statute. And so you have sort of a gray area of how far can you go with your signage regulations? And for many towns, where, signage is prolific, there's concern that they can only enforce to a certain extent or set design standards or other standards to a certain extent, based on the language of the legislation. So it's sort of how many signs, what kind of signs does the state of Connecticut allow us, because they give us they give the commission the power to adopt zoning. And so how far can we go? So that's really the question there. Transportation oriented development, the TOD conversations, there's lots of different groups working on that. Desegregate Connecticut is asked to come and give a presentation of what their legislative priorities are at the March meeting. They were going to come tonight and then, decided to put them off until March when things are a little bit farther along and we have a little bit better sense of kind of what that content is shaping up to be. So they're gonna come and talk about that. And then the other piece is, and this is more controversial, and I don't know that we'll actually see a proposed bill on this, but it's something that should just be sort of in the back of folks' minds. There is ongoing discussion about how zoning boards of appeal review variance requests. And the potential changes that is fairly controversial at the planning sort of level is whether or not to have a different set of standards for dimensional variances. So use variances, I want to put an auto repair shop in the middle of this residential neighborhood. That kind of variance wouldn't be up for discussion. But what would be is, can legislation be drafted to let folks say, rather than the strict hardship test, can they measure it against, will this do harm to the neighbor? Do I believe, is this in the interest of health, safety, and welfare to slide some of these standards and take a case by case basis in a little bit of a different way? So it gives a little bit more flexibility for zoning boards of appeals to look at how they handle the dimensional variances. So you're not in that space of proving a hardship, which if done correctly is almost impossible for folks to get. It's a really hard test. And so there's been a lot of folks pushing back to say, how should we be handling these requests, and is there a better way? Like I said, it's pretty controversial. I don't know that we'll see anything on it this year, but it will probably, if it doesn't come this year, it may come next year. So just to watch.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will, well, does anybody have questions? Questions about any of that? I mean, I don't want to hog it. Go ahead, Zach.
In lead up to the March presentation for desegregated CT, is there any materials related to TOD that are going to be distributed to us, or that?
So I've asked them to give that, and I know they have a spiel that they're going around to various towns and giving, so I've asked for some preliminary documents. I haven't received them yet. The other piece is up on the Desegregate website. They should have a copy of their legislation. If you want to start reading it now, feel free. Otherwise, we'll get something out that has links and stuff to folks.
Thank you. Any other questions? With that, we'll move on to item 6, new business. The first item is PZC 24-1, removal of the existing crushed stone bocce court at Clinton Beach, replacement with an asphalt basketball court and surrounding fence within 100 feet of the tidal wetlands. So this is our applicant is listed as Robert Potter, Director of Parks and Recreation, and town of Clinton, of course, owns it. Is there a someone here to present this to me?
Yes, we have a consultant, WBA service, that has worked on the layout and the maps, everything else. He could probably be the best one to answer any technical questions you might have concerning.
Okay. Well, I'll start, the one question and the one concern, of course, is it comes up also in what the state mentions, in their, note. Is the fact that it's within 100 feet of the tidal wetlands, and we would really like to see it moved away from the tidal wetlands as much as possible. At least I would, and.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what I noticed the state also, in their comments to you, suggested. Is that, something that you would be able to do for it?
Yeah, right now, the location of it doesn't butt to the existing parking lot. So it's right up to where the parking lot was. Originally, we had it back a couple feet off the parking lot, going back towards the tidal, water line there. But now it's been moved up right to, the parking lot itself.
Okay, so you've adjusted your plans based on that already?
Yes.
Have you received those?
Different.
Okay,
That's the suggestion. I believe
okay,
that was the suggestion, that we go right to the parking lot.
That, there was a staff recommendation to try to accommodate the use and allow the project to go forward and try to move it closer and out of that. The biggest piece here is that it's the 50-foot buffer to the tidal wetland. We're in section 26. There was a prohibition on new impervious surface. And so we're trying to say, can we move this thing in a way that allows the Park and Rec Commission to really, have the use that they're looking for and go forward while,
so if it's not a new impervious surface, then
correct. So the bocce court that's compacted stone at this stage is not a pervious surface. And so they can take credit for that area and use that. And there's some room to slide. So there may be a way to make this happen. That's-
So we can become compliant with the request.
And I think that's what we're hoping to chat about and make sure that we can get to that point.
Do you have, so did you make a new plan or?
No, WBA would have to revise the plan that we initially submitted to show, the location, as it exists here.
Yeah, that has to be done. Because tidal wetland is very important. And Abby said you got credit for the bocce, or maybe we'll have a big problem with it.
So they have to amend, sorry.
right,
Sorry.
that would be a condition.
Okay,
If we wanted to do it now, we have a choice.
okay.
Okay, we could ask them to come back with new plans that show the change that was recommended. Or we could condition it and have them, have to, before they could start work, submit the plans to,
I think that,
land use.
the other question I had was there's 1,260 square feet of new additional impervious surface, so moving it, drawing the plans that would move the basketball court to the parking lot. I'm not sure what that would change the new impervious surface. So I'm assuming you get as close to the parking lot as you can, the rest has to be then pervious surface because to be compliant. What does that do to the overall like shape or like use of the court? Like how does that change it? And then in terms of like our regulations, as opposed to that's the state's regulations. The 18.4.2A talks about like views and stuff. Like how does the changing of the use of the court conflict with what we're seeing with the changing of the views? And like, is that still like a cost, to go forward at that point?
It's something that you can consider if you feel that it, does interfere with the view. I mean, you're talking about a parking lot though, and, a chain link fence.
I'm just citing a relevant.
Right, but
regulation.
that's the way that that's one of those things that you have to interpret for yourself.
Oh, and I just wanna see with the new plans as opposed to approving now on continuance of the plans, to see the new plan prior to approving the.
Appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what does everybody else think?
As far as the surface goes, just the surface from a bocce court to a basketball court, I don't think that that's a big deal.
No, we take it up a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of going the same place, right? Basketball court.
It's gonna be over a bit to the parking lot.
And it's gonna be enclosed and fenced in?
Yes,
You know, you're showing them that's really
No, I'm showing the actual blueprint.
this one.
So if you look here, according to what our documents were, the bocce court is just in this area.
Yeah.
And then it comes here, but this isn't abutting the parking lot. So we have to move that over to comply with the wetlands.
Well-
And then some of this would have to, in theory, become permeable.
right,
So seeing the new, this is kind of changing the product significantly. So like I said, and that's what I said before, going back to seeing what the new project would look like back to conditioning and approval.
and just pull it up for us.
So, yeah.
Page 4 on that, basketball bid set is what I was looking at.
Currently, there's a little embankment right from the parking lot to the bocce court, right?
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
like
some
a
slight-
sand mound.
Yeah.
On there, yes.
Is that gonna be graded down, or is that gonna be,
Oh,
is that mound gonna remain there?
You zoom in on the right side, yeah.
So,
Graded down, that would be graded down.
You're talking.
It's gonna go
Right here. Yeah,
Yeah, this is staying. This deck is staying.
okay.
So that's
And
staying.
in order to talk about this, because we have folks who are with us online, I needed to share it, so. I could talk.
okay,
Okay.
now you can do it.
By moving the court 7 feet, that abuts the parking lot, so that sand dune will be removed
Okay,
to accommodate the court.
so it's gonna have like chain link fencing around it, correct? All right, isn't that, with the curbing there along the parking lot, is that gonna create like pooling of water?
There's no curbing left there
Okay,
on the edge of that parking. So this pavement would abut that parking lot pavement. It's gonna be relatively the same elevation. The court will be pitching from this side to the parking lot, away from the wetlands, away from the tidal wetland.
So it moves the water away, okay.
So I don't think it impacts the flow of water at all from the parking lot to the tidal wetlands. You know, it's right on the edge of the shore right there, either the bocce court or that, you're just making, basically, it's gonna be 2 or 3 times larger than the bocce court, is what's proposed.
Okay.
Right, the edge of the parking lot is roughly elevation 6. And we're gonna be going from elevation 7 to 6. So we'll be sloping that way.
Okay, from what I've heard so far, and correct me, you know, this is everybody's opinion. It sounds like we would like to see the plans revised to show the new position for the court, relative to what we have so far, before we're ready to make a, motion on this.
I have a question.
Is that, well, just before you do that, does that sound like what I'm hearing from everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty
go
much,
ahead.
yeah.
It has to have a chain link fence around it.
It's probably a good idea to have a chain link fence around it, just to keep the balls from going into the.
So
They're nice, sorry.
can I just read what,
Right.
I was speaking about prior? Section 18.4.2 of the regulations says visual access. Waterfront property shall be developed in a manner that is consistent with the waterfront setting so that visual access to and from the water is maximized. In reviewing coastal site plans for development of waterfront property, the commission shall consider the following guidelines. 1, the quality and extent of views from adjacent public streets through the property to the water. The property in this circumstance, correct me if I'm mistaken, is what's going on with basketball. Look that up. 2, the design and relationship of the development to the waterfront as viewed from the water. And 3, the quality and extent of the view of adjacent property owners. So that's just like a consideration, in my opinion, that's a consideration also to be included to. One comment and is the wetland setback varies from the north to the south end. So moving it to 7 feet over, you're still gonna have to remove some of the impervious surface to be compliant. So
Well, they aren't going to, what they are doing is not, correct me, you guys correct me if I'm saying this wrong. They aren't, it's not that they're removing the impervious surface to be compliant, they're not adding to the impervious surface.
but so in terms, let me rephrase that. Sorry.
Because it's already impervious.
Already.
So rather than the bocce court takes up the full length, I guess is a question I'm asking then? Because you're not,
It,
if you're moving it over,
but the bocce court is pervious.
okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, you're gonna put asphalt down for the blacktop for the court. You're gonna have to reduce the amount of asphalt for that court.
Not if they put it on the parking lot.
You're abutting the parking lot. You're not putting it on the, all right, so that's a new scenario, you're removing parking lot accessibility.
Right.
Okay,
That, to me, that's what I read. Is that correct?
We're not gonna be removing any parking, there's. You can ask Mr. Fire, they have enough parking as it is. By moving this 7 feet, and that's that 7 foot dimension, you're above the parking,
Above the parking. Okay.
above the parking, you're not gonna
Okay, John.
encroach upon the parking.
but then so then does that give you the 1,260 feet?
It doesn't change those calculations. Because by moving this over to abut the parking, now you're decreasing the amount of space that you were taking on the opposite side.
Right.
So you're
You're actually making less of an excavation job out of it.
right, the calculation doesn't change in terms of the increase of impervious surface.
So I guess my question then is, if you have 15 feet and 23 feet on each side from the setback point, is that accurate? If you look at on the north side, you have 15, on the
Right.
south,
That would increase.
so you're moving it 7 feet, so you're gonna get 22 feet and 30 feet from the setback. So you need to get an extra 20 feet from the south side and 28 feet from the north side, which would come out of the court, is that right?
Come out of the court?
No, your setbacks
No.
are the same
Right.
from the bocce court to the basketball court, from the water, from the wetlands, from the tidal wetlands.
So the bocce court is permeable and the basketball court is.
The bocce court is so compacted that I don't think we could sort of in good faith call it permeable.
I wouldn't even call it
So the way that in the recommendation for the staff, sort of recommendation here was written such that there is a portion of, as you get closer to the parking lot, you're farther away from the dividing point, the 50-foot buffer, right? So the idea is to pull some of this impervious area, which is prohibited in the 50-foot buffer, out. Then the idea is you shift some of that out of the way, right? And so the question is, what is the area that would have been, if it stayed in the proposed location, would have been in the buffer, comes out because you're moving it. Right now, there's not a proposal to reduce the size of the basketball court. That's what I'm hearing. But that a portion of it would come out. And the question is, how do the numbers, that I hear you asking is, how do the numbers end up? Once you move it and you subtract out the area of the bocce that you get credit for, is there any impervious area left in the 50-foot? Is that?
That's my question,
Okay.
yeah. So sorry
That's
for
the question.
not figuring out how to phrase that.
No,
I mean,
I misunderstood it too.
I think if you put the two pictures of the basketball court and the bocce court, if you can move that to the right, Abby, you wouldn't mind. Then you can sort of see a visual of, like a before and after. If you can.
right, so
She's gonna move a little more, I think.
when you move this to abut the parking lot, that slides this line 7 feet over, further away from that wood deck.
Right.
So you're not increasing any impervious surface, you're just moving it.
Right, you're moving it away from the inland wetland.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
then how far after you move it, what is the distance from the setback?
It's gonna be an even swap.
same, it's an even swap, yeah.
No, the distance from the inland wetlands is moved
Because
over.
you gain that seven, is for whatever the shift is, and so we have to see what the, you know,
So here's the river.
So once we move it, we're out of the zone of being,
that is the question.
Right, yeah.
That has to be answered,
Right,
is
that's-
what square footage of impervious area falls within the 50-foot buffer? And the reason that, and we talked about this, you know, in our meetings, the reason that this is important is because there's a prohibition in the commission's regulations. And the
Mhm.
commission can't vary their own standards. And so we have to figure out a solution to say, how do we make sure there's a playable court and things work for the recreational needs of the town and also meet the regulations, and what's that middle ground? So the shift, and then the question of how much is left over, that either has to be addressed or is handled in a way that, that meets the regulation.
What about if there's too much impervious, surface, if there's, a couple of drains put in under the court?
So the regulations aren't written for that kind of give and take. They're not that, they're pretty strict. And Bo, this is what you and I talked about, at the department head meeting the other day. Even Bo acknowledged there may be a need to reduce some of this, and that's the question, is by how much? You know, even if, I mean, I think the drive aisle in that part of the parking lot is pretty wide. I think it seems like it's like 30-something feet versus a standard 24 for two-way traffic. So you might be able to pick up and put wheel stops farther back and have some of that space taken up too. So I think there's options here to shift around. The question is, what is that gonna look like and what's gonna work for all here?
Question, if I don't know if you guys can hear me, but is it possible to use some sort of permeable surface for the court, like a permeable paver? Or I know clay isn't really permeable, but maybe considered more than concrete? And probably more expensive, but
There are some
Consider-
stuff compacted
Yeah.
surfaces that you can.
There's a lot of different services, like Larry said.
Triple basketball and paper driveway, it was all over the place.
And also there's a maintenance thing, that I think is important to consider, that from a staff perspective and keeping this thing up, trying to vacuum sand out of a pervious, I mean, those things have to be maintained, and you've got to keep the sediment out of them, and this is not a location where that's gonna be a simple thing to do. It wants to catch sand today, and it's gonna have mussels dropped on it and, all sorts of stuff, so.
Can I point one other thing out? This is not a regulation court. This is a court for pickup basketball for people who are using the beach. So as it is, this court has been squashed down
Squash down.
to fit
That's good.
the area without having a
Analogy.
major effect. I mean,
I get it, the kids will enjoy it.
Right.
Yeah, so if you move it, according to this, it looks like, you would go from what is currently about an 8-foot, distance to the wetland line to about, 10 feet at its closest point. And on the other side, where it's 23 feet right now, you're gonna move that, it's gonna probably be about, 27. Okay, if you moving that over the 7 feet, because it's at a diagonal. So it doesn't-
28 feet,
Yeah.
yes.
So you're getting it farther away from the inland wetlands. And what it's doing is going to the, bocce court, which we're being told by, Abby is essentially pervious or impervious now.
The way it functions, it's been there for so long, it's compacted, it's.
Well, don't forget, we have no say in the tidal wetlands, so we have, they're very strict guidelines. If we can pass those at that,
Right.
I have no, objection, I don't think anybody does, but if we get past these.
Yeah, it's tidal wetlands, not inland.
Yeah, don't forget, we have nothing to do with tidal wetlands. It's state.
Well, this is the upland area that this commission regulates under section 26, where there's a
26,
prohibition on the.
8.2.
Right, so this is, we're here because we're within the reach of where we have to have a coastal site plan. So
Right.
it has to come before you for permission, and in part of that review is this section on the impervious area and that 50-foot tidal buffer. So our regulation, so the state didn't, if you know it in their report, they didn't flag this issue because it's not, this is not a state standard, this is a Clinton regulation. It's been, yeah, 2021 or something.
So, right, we can't waive our own right.
Right.
Yeah, we can't.
And so that's the exercise here, is to say, is there a modification to these plans that lets the project continue on its trajectory and work up for a spring construction and all those kinds of things that also meets the letter of the regulation.
So you guys designed this, what's your input on that? Can you make this work?
In terms of,
Moving it over to the 7.
Yeah, we have no problem with that. If that's, you're gonna do contingency, that's the move.
It has to be, because
Yes, we have no problem with that.
we're governed by.
Yeah. We have no problem with your recommendation, but I'm hearing about fence now. That's what I'm worried about.
That's it. So my comment with that was just related to, so we have, various courts, there's courts already there's hoops, we'll say, courts is not the general word for it. There's hoops already at the beach, then you have like courts at like the Indian River and Joel and stuff, like, I wanna see what the new plan would look like, because we have an additional regulation that concerns with the fence. So if this.
So you're asking for like an artist rendition?
Well, not just more the plans revised and see, okay, we're gonna see, this is the plan going forward. And we're gonna go through one regulation, there is a second regulation that applies, like, that's where the commission's
Now-
discretion needs to be weighed and thought. Off of this plan, as we see it now, I don't feel comfortable weighing those two choices personally. But the commission, we're the commission here, like, my opinion isn't it, but that's my reservation at this point.
I will say, the way that, I interpret that, okay, is that, for example, how it would impact neighbors. Okay, you have to then look at, a larger view of the plan. Where the nearest neighbors are and what their view would have been. So, for example, going out, to the road across the bridge, those neighbors will not be impacted because you can't see it from the.
Yeah, they won't be impacted at all.
Okay.
No, yeah, that's the question I had, because the other view is across the river, which is probably a half a mile to
Yeah,
right.
Short Road.
I don't know.
So the view of neighbors aren't gonna be impacted. I'm sorry.
So that would be what you would have to consider, or from across from the hammocks, looking across this, where would that fence interfere with their view, given the distance? Okay, so you've got to put, that's what I'm looking at for that. And so that's the way that I consider it, and that's the way I would,
I think that's a relevant consideration under one of the subsections.
right now.
But I don't, there's
the
other
other two.
subsections that are also to
Right,
be
and
considered.
that's what you have to do for each one of those, is look at, how it affects that use for you in your, mind.
Yeah, and I don't think, just to be clear, I'm just saying there's a relevant regulation to
Oh,
consider based on what this drawing, which as it stands we cannot approve the relevant drawing due to the setbacks. So we can condition.
Well, they said they can fix it.
So that we can motion.
They can fix it.
I understand that. We can motion to a condition approval based on a change.
Yep.
Or we could have them change it, because they're gonna have to anyway, and take another look, and then see.
Yeah,
the
what I
spec-
would prefer to have happen tonight, after hearing everything, is that, we have a motion to table so that they have the time to.
That's all I was trying to ultimately
I
get to.
I would suggest to get an elevation plan also, whatever fence.
The height of the fence, you mean? Okay.
What height are
An
you guys
elevation
looking?
plan, just from what you would see from eye level, or from the bottom of the court.
You need a 10-foot fence there?
I would think so.
Well, I would say 12.
May I ask, what was the height of the fence you were having in mind? 10 feet, thank you.
10 feet is, the cost difference between 8 and 10 feet is minimal. So I normally go with 10 feet.
Okay.
And if I might add to this conversation of the fence being a visual effect. Black fencing is proven to be far less obtrusive than the old fashioned green fencing that everybody thought was
Yes.
right. Black, you see right through, you don't even notice the black fence. And as far as the height goes, I wouldn't go below 8 feet because of the basketball. I mean, the hoop is 10 feet high and as it is, so it, with the cars there, it'd be a problem.
Thank you.
And then,
Go ahead.
the only other thing I would like to add is that we're always trying to look at a lot of different things. Right now, where the basketball court is located, we are taking up approximately 10 parking spaces at Town Beach, as that is, boarded off for just basketball, striped for basketball right now. We have no parking signs. So we're losing at least 10, there might be 12, okay? My other concern is it's in a parking lot, cars come in and out of there, safety of the people using that as a basketball court. So by relocating this, it's actually twofold. It's a benefit to the town that we're gaining additional parking spaces. And we're also making a recreational facility, safer, okay, for the use of the people using it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
wait, I totally agree with Bo on this, because I'm down there, you see kids running, you're coming in,
It's a safer haven that way.
and the balls come right at you, you know, it's wide open, you see parents running back and forth, running after the kids want to play, so that is a big factor, and I'm down there a lot, so, it's, yeah.
And to date, with your comments, to date, fortunately, we haven't had any instances.
We're lucky.
But I'm down there a lot, especially during our regular season, and I see the potential there.
There's a big potential.
So I'd like to cut this off and simply, ask for a motion for, the table requesting that we get the new plan showing the, a revised plan showing the shift in the court. And any description of what the, fencing will look like. Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to table this until
Next month.
what day? March
I think it's the 11th.
March 11th. Will that give you guys enough time to do all this?
The only other thing that I'm concerned about is that I have a grant for Town Beach, and the last thing to spend that money, is drawing near the end. And I would like to get this project undergoing and get it out, to contract, so that money is still in place, and I continue to have that, okay?
How long would it take you, with the chairman's permission, well, how long would it take you to get the plans?
Tomorrow,
You can do this tomorrow?
if that's what it needs to be, it'll be done tomorrow.
It's up to you,
Well, we've got a motion. Did anybody second it?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, it's worth discussion. It's not just up to me.
Yeah.
Well, when is your grant close?
Yeah, we don't want you to lose the grant.
By December this coming year.
So it sounds like,
We're talking about a month, Paul.
yeah, March, we will have,
We'll have this wrapped up in
we
March.
have 65 days
Yeah,
maximum at this
the problem
point.
though is from the initial cost that I received over 6 months ago to now, it's increased quite a bit. So another 3 months or whatever.
We're
I'm
talking
just
about,
trying to stay within the boundaries,
Well,
and I want
thank you.
this to happen.
we appreciate you.
It'll be about
we're only
3
asking
weeks
for a
from now.
month.
Somewhere 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, once you goes to Abby will look at it, and then,
Good, make sure that
make sure all the Ts are crossed and all the Is are dotted, and
next month we can move on it.
we'll move forward.
by definition, we only have 65 days to complete this, right? Like,
Well, this is actually town, business,
This
so I
is
don't know
town.
if we have a clock.
I just mean to say it'll be.
There's no clock.
Sponsored thing, it's not like the regulation.
Oh, okay.
piece, so.
Yeah, it's a town, so, but
Yeah,
I wanna,
you're right.
I wanna
It won't take
accommodate.
us, you know, at max, worst case scenario, 2 months from now, this is gonna be figured out.
Right.
So
Right.
that's well,
But
yes.
as far as getting approved through here, I mean, I'm on board with it, but.
We're all on board, we're all on board, we just.
So,
need to-
I
we
just
have
want to move it forward, because I do have grant money, number one.
Well,
And-
well,
The piece will be over.
Wait, we've got a motion on the floor, so let's stay with that.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
said, yes, Lauren, to seconded the
Yes.
motion?
Yep,
So it's-
so
Vote.
I would, call a vote, all those in favor,
Aye.
opposed? Staying, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
You,
Next item
Okay.
for new
thank you,
business.
gentlemen.
We have the request from town council to look at blight, ordinance and design standards and whether or not we want to do something in our regs to, deal with these more, forcefully or by regulation. In the past, I will tell you, because, and this predates Kathy, so it's showing my age on the commission. We had been told by the staff that design standards were almost impossible to write and enforce. Okay? The commission at the time really wanted to do design standards. Okay, I don't know how you feel about it. I am very strongly supportive of us doing design standards. But, you know, my question to Abby had been, is that really an issue? And she said, well, it is if you don't write them correctly.
Yeah,
I'm ad-libbing a little bit. But so it is something we could consider, and I, personally would ask each of you to consider this as something that would help us really, move the town forward in having design standards. The other thing that would come up as a question for this is, should we wait until we do the town plan of conservation and development to do this, or do it now? I, again, am of the opinion we should start now.
May I?
Yes, you may, Ed.
Well, we had a workshop, if you remember, not too long ago, and, I remember Dylan and you, we all spoke in favor, making design standards and making this town more accessible, and Abby came up with some brilliant ideas, you know, what we talked about. There's nothing that I don't think we can't achieve as a commission. I believe that we should move forward with this and jump in with both feet. I mean, that's my opinion, so.
Okay, go ahead.
So what does this look like? What do changing these regs like really look like, right? What does that entail?
So, through your chair,
Go ahead.
so it's a multi-month. I mean, this is not a short
Right.
conversation. This is a public engagement effort. This is a community conversation led by the Planning and Zoning Commission for this portion of it. So if you look at sort of the big picture of the conversation on downtown, town council is looking at the overarching sort of momentum for downtown, and they're trying to help all of the various boards and commissions that have pieces of this work kind of go in the same direction. So us, EDC, design review board, all of the, pulling in the chamber, doing all different pieces of this to say, let's make sure that when we talk about downtown, we have a common vision, we all know where we want to go, and town council sort of sets that tone and says, here's the direction, folks. The nitty gritty of how this comes together falls to this group, because you are the body that has the authority to make and amend regulation. So this is your legislative role. This is what you get. There is a difference that I think we need to be clear on. The blight ordinance, the legislative authority for the blight ordinance rests with the town council. And that is sort of a parallel effort on enforcement of blight specifically. What this group is being, I think, asked to consider is a zoning regulation that comes along with appropriate design guidelines. So we're talking not just about the look, but we're talking about what uses are approved defining the boundary of the downtown area by a zoning district, because we have a couple that affect downtown right now. What kinds of uses do we want to see? What kinds of standards? So, things going through, what do the setbacks look like? How many parking spaces are required downtown? What are all the different pieces that go into making a successful sort of amalgamation of standards to create this district? And then the design guidelines come into play. And this is what, Mr. Chairman, we were talking about a little bit earlier, is if you can create visual cues for folks in the guidelines themselves. So if you're saying, okay, here are the fence styles we like, here are the ones we don't like, and here are the findings the design review board has to make and give to the planning and zoning commission in order for the commission to say yes when an application comes through. We can craft that regulation. There's always a little bit, and just like, in the interpretation of the view under the coastal site plan conversation, there's always room for discretion. And in this role, this is sort of adjudicative piece. Once the regulations are adopted, you have authority to make decisions. And as long as you back them up with your findings, and those findings are rooted in the POCD and the regs, this is what you do every day. So it's a matter of making sure that the regulations are specific enough to be clear to the development community and property owners what we're looking for, but also not so restrictive that we squash prospective investment. And that's going to be the balance to strike.
Go ahead, Zach.
So you mentioned you had something drawn up or something like that?
So there's ideas, right? There's,
Oh, okay.
my role is not to sort of say, I'm gonna prescribe a set of standards and a set of ideas. My role here is to facilitate a conversation with this commission, help you engage the public, check back in with town council, work with the various other boards and commissions that are already engaged in conversation. So EDC is already, they have an effort that they're doing to reach out to the businesses. There's pieces that are already in play, and the idea here is not to step on toes. The idea is these regulations should reflect what all of these various groups have been working on. So there's a lot of conversation to be had about it. There's a structural process of, does this group want to tackle it as a whole and have it be sort of a standing item on commission agendas? Or do you want it to be referred to the regulations committee and they come back with some recommendations? So we got to talk about how we want to do this.
Go ahead.
Just to let you know, EDC has been working very closely with a lot of businesses in town. You guys know that.
We haven't gotten there yet. The payments have been. sitting in Hartford.
Well, the barbershop that I just sold, they just showed up there and offered, two different, a 70, a 30.
And
Granite Beach, look at Granite Beach.
Yeah.
So, and the only reason, not throwing anybody in the bus, because the owner of Granite Beach, the owner of, who owns the building, I'm sorry. The owner of Leo, and he just passed July 16th, and because we offered him $50,000. 50,000 from EDC. So as a thing, remember, we offered, and it was refused because he's an old fashioned Italian, and he didn't want nothing to do with it. But now that he passed, the sons, and I kicked him in the butt, because I went down there, I went to talk to him. I said, we're offering you this money, fix it. You're not gonna have nothing for your grandkids. So they fixed and they spent the money, but now they're hitting up other buildings. So, but if we have guidelines of what we want out of this town, right?
And what I'm hearing is since the other groups are working on this too, we need to
act.
whatever, we need to ask them for their reports.
Right.
So that we're not working at cross purposes.
Brian, you can help us with that, right? Okay.
So,
Brian, you would like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. So the town council, Brian Rockefeller, town council, hi everyone. The town council put together a downtown improvement subcommittee, I think it's called. Thank you. A few members of the town council to start coordinating all of the things that you were just talking about. The EDC is doing stuff and the folks are doing, the flower pots are doing stuff and planning and zoning, just making sure that all of those efforts are coordinated behind a common vision to drive downtown to what the town wants it to be.
Is there a recording or information from that workshop that was held or something? Just kind of, I'm kind of trying to catch up at this point, like, just get an idea of what's going on.
It was a vision workshop.
Yeah, I can, what I can do is I can provide the materials that I've given to the subcommittee for the town council, which is sort of a summary of, here's, it's also has been distributed in their meetings. Here's the vision, here are some next steps. And then the thing that the subcommittee will be continuing to work on is I came up with sort of a prioritized matrix of various actions that could be taken and sort of put them together in a way to analyze, how long will it take? What's the level, order of magnitude cost? What pieces of the vision does this tick off? So there's sort of check boxes to say, well, this really, if we want to say, okay, we're, supporting business. These are the ones that check off supporting business. If we're showcasing community pride. These are the ones that showcase community pride. So it's sort of a visual to say what kinds of actions are sort of low hanging fruit, high impact, low impact. How do we, how does the council start to work through those? Not all of those are the purview of this group. So the thing that really rose to the top of the initial conversation as they were starting to go through those priorities was the regulations and the aesthetic that we're requiring folks to meet are important.
That's what we.
And that one thing the town can control
Yeah,
through legislative action.
Right.
So they were really looking for the things that, you can't necessarily force a private property owner to do specific things or, mandate that this is going to be a restaurant in this location and a theater in this location, but you can say, here are the allowable uses and here's what we want them to look
That's
like.
the only way we can circumvent, because we don't own any of those buildings. But if we tell them what we own, what they can put in there, Mr. Commissioner.
Right,
If we tell them what we can put in there, and-
what the uses are.
What the uses are, we could curtail a lot of
Go ahead.
stuff that can't, you know what I mean, you know what I mean, so at least we're on track or something.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Could we put something about, wear and tear of a building's facade? Is that something,
Right,
is there something where we can say after 20+ years, buildings need to maintain a certain standard of facade?
So
I
this
think
is
you-
where zoning and blight tend to work together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and again, they're different enforcement paths, they are different mechanisms, different laws govern them, different paths to achieve compliance govern those things. The parallel conversation to this is a discussion on the effectiveness of the existing blight ordinance. Kathy has the benefit of enforcing both, and so Kathy, certainly feel free to jump in anytime. But the content of the ordinance may not reflect the visual aesthetic people want to see on some of these properties, right? And so the idea being, the zoning regulations don't typically say you have to come back. There's a temporal limit on how long your plan is good for. You get that plan, that's your site plan, you got permission to have, a building with a brick bottom and hardy plank top and this level of fenestration and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't maintain it, that's where blight can kick in.
Right.
And then the other part of it, and then if somebody does something, they make a modification and they don't come in for a permit or they don't get the right thing, then we can go after them. And that's where zoning enforcement comes in. But the blight piece is really defining that well enough so that there's the teeth to say, if somebody complains and said, ooh, they need to power wash that building. There's not a thing we can do about that in the current blight ordinance today, right? That building has peeling paint. That's not covered in the way.
we
the
could put
ordinance.
those in regulations,
You could put them in the blight ordinance.
Blight.
The zoning regulations would be less
be less,
simple.
but we could put that, like,
If we developed a set of design standards, would the blight ordinance be able to be modified to utilize those as part of their standards?
To an extent, and I think this is where we have to be very intentional about what we qualify as blight, which kind of falls under sort of the legislative authority of like public nuisance, health, safety, welfare. And so when we're talking about blight, we have to talk about, is this something that we don't like? Or is this something that is causing a very clear identifiable, public health, economic driving down, what is the harm in the thing that we're seeing? And does it rise to the level to be qualified as blight? Because, we have to, again, it's always that push and pull of balance. Go too strict and no one wants to come to your town, right?
Right.
we don't want
So
to do that.
we really gotta balance.
Well, we have a beautiful downtown, if we could fix, you know,
We do?
if we could fix the facades on a lot.
Parking, there's no reason to go down there. It's stuck. It's stuck.
I'm trying to unstick it.
I understand that, but
This
there's
is,
no reason to get out of your car and walk around down there unless you're going, a coffee break or,
No, it's quite a picture.
I mean, it's a problem. It's a small little area that has, if you notice, all the towns in the shoreline that have a nice downtown have usually
Except-
diagonal parking where you can drive down the street and pull in and get out of your car and,
But none of them are bisected by a river, they're gonna have train tracks to rent.
no, I understand that, but it's a tough,
Jay, we have work to do, but
yeah.
you have to have a
No,
vision.
I understand you
Look.
can make the pizza place, the new facade and that is great, okay, I understand that. But it's still, it looks nicer, but there's gotta be some draw to go down there, there's some draw to go down Commercial Street and, walk around that area, because there's the dock and the little ramp and Lobster Landing and, the boat place.
Commerce, you mean?
I think the design standards, based on my limited knowledge from this conversation, the design standards help inform the downtown, as in if we say, these are the uses of the buildings, it could kind of
Yeah, no.
begin the
Jay,
downtown.
I'm not trying to be funny or anything, but if you go back a little more than 5 years ago, we had a house of ill repute on the corner, Post Office Square. I mean, if that wasn't, it was unbelievable. So I mean,
Well, I mean, I've been in the town since 1984.
so you knew about it.
But that area, it's so difficult. I agree with what we're saying, to change it and do things and improve it, but it's
not gonna be easy.
Well, I think one thing that's very unique about Clinton is, the downtown area was there long before other towns and areas were that.
Yeah.
Aside from Guilford, so I mean, as far as they were designed, a lot of those towns were designed like Old Saybrook and Guilford to have a main drag with an island in the middle and it's spread out, so
Yep.
it was a big thoroughfare, the boulevard. This is a unique town, and that's what makes it, quaint, first of all, but it
It's
also.
very quaint.
It's, but as far as, it also keeps the taxes down a little bit in the town, you start growing like crazy. Property taxes are gonna go sky high,
but if we can try to target the businesses that we want to see downtown. And you have to start to change the facade, right? They all have to work in tandem. Somebody's not gonna wanna invest in our downtown if it doesn't look kept up and welcoming, right? And so, but then you have a problem, now there's empty buildings, but nobody wants to rent those empty buildings because of the way it looks. But then if we can start changing the way it looks and starting to put the shops and the stores that we wanna see, then you start to get a more vibrant downtown.
Look at CVS, look how long it's been empty. And they bought that for 1.7 million.
4.5.
$1.5 million. They purchased that building. And we bent over backwards to
I'm trying to change.
change everything, to have that work, to have that done. And then they had a breakup with the partner.
Beautiful piece of property.
Yeah, well, it's gonna deteriorate, and
It'd
then,
be a great place for a restaurant.
okay.
Anyhow.
I'm just
Excuse me,
saying.
Michael, may I speak for a moment? I just-
Go ahead, Kathy.
As the boots on the ground in this operation with Blight and design guidelines and everything, I just wanted to let you know that I am happy to, at any point, if you want my opinion or information based on, my statistics of what I've been enforcing. There just a couple things I wanted to point out. One thing, because Abby and I, actually we had a long discussion on this months before Abby even started working for the town. I had called her to get some information on what her town, when she was town planner, another town was doing. We want to really be careful for a couple of reasons. One thing I see a lot of is I do not, and I won't do this, selective enforcement. I need to be consistent. And I want to make sure that whatever I do, people can look at my paperwork and my paper trail and see that I've applied the regulations consistently. A lot of times what I see in blight, especially in residential sections, is it's true. We turn into a homeowners association. I don't really feel like that's where my role should be. A lot of it's based on neighbors who just don't like each other and use me as a tool. I've been used in neighbor fights. I've been used in a lot of different ways, and I don't feel comfortable in that role. And I think that we want to be careful, because while we want things to look good, we can't regulate how people live, and we can't regulate taste. When it comes to blight for residential areas, some people love a meadow, and we do allow meadows, and some people have manicured lawns with little soldiers for shrubs. And I think it's dangerous when we start to say, well, that's a violation, and that isn't, because it becomes much too micromanagerial. But when you're talking about commercial districts, I think what Abby was saying in terms of the uses, that's a great, way to do it. Or as Cynthia just said, looking at the buildings and, looking forward, what we can do to make them more attractive. I think that's good as well. It's just, I think it's so important what Abby said about making good regulations, because when I do my reports and my investigations, that's what I use. And so if the regulation isn't written well, then I either can't enforce, or I enforce, but I don't feel good about it. So there's a lot of ways that we have to be careful on how these things are worded.
Excuse me, Captain, we didn't bring up, like
Residential.
residential, we were just going with regulations for commercial.
I know, but I'm just bringing up blight in general, because blight ordinance for me most of the time is residential.
That lantern guy, whatever, on his lawn.
Okay, I would like to get us to a point so we know what we're doing going forward.
Just the regulations for
And
commercial.
so what I think, I would like to ask for first, is related to the design standards. If we could get some examples of enforceable design standards from, other areas that, so they've been tested. Just so that we can then model that kind of language and, okay. I think that moving first on that would be important. As Zach, requested, I think if we could see some of the, reports that have been generated already, just so we know what direction we're going in, not necessarily that we're, able to put everything into regulation that they're asking for, but so we do have that together. I think that's a good place to start. One of the things that we probably want to consider, based on what I've heard, is that we would rezone the downtown area as just a downtown area, which would allow us to provide specific uses for the downtown area. Okay, now that is a bigger issue that's going to require, some public hearings, might be contentious. Okay, but, that would be something that where we would want to have the discussions and see what everybody else is thinking for uses for the downtown area. We can then move forward with generating, probably some public discussion periods, not necessarily, public hearing, but, have like a, what do you call it, charrette?
Charrettes,
Charrettes.
and we can have the conversation of form, use, and what we prescribe, mechanisms for how we approve. So what is by right and comes to just Kathy and I versus what comes to the full commission, and where that, how easy is it for someone to start up and come into town too?
Right.
So all of those things, but that, yes, that's.
Steve, how many empty buildings we have right now, next to, the novice, across you from Pat's? Is there like 2 or 3 empty vacant storefronts?
Yeah, the old dress barn is there.
Yeah.
That's empty.
I think there's 2 or 3.
There, we do have, quite a few empty buildings.
Yeah,
that are down
so
there.
if we come up with some uses, design uses, then before they're rented out.
The thing I would also just put, and again, I think we're having a process conversation about how we're gonna go through this, because this meat and potatoes of the conversation is I think we're gonna get into much more depth on it in the future. One seed I will plant with the commission is prescribing the uses may reflect a snapshot in time of what we think the market should be doing for us or what's possible. But I think we need to be very conscious of the longevity of these regulations and how we put together other uses or how we talk about form enabling a diversity of uses that creates the vibrancy. So telling folks they need to create a certain ability of to make eyes on the street, or we're gonna figure out a solution to the parking downtown whereby things that are privately held now come into public control, so there's no parking standard that people have to be. They don't have to provide parking, we do it for you. Those kinds of things may be conversations we need to have, rather than saying, we only wanna see restaurants, art studios, and retail. Because those may or may not survive there's lots of different factors that go into those business decisions.
Right.
And without a market analysis, that's hard to get right.
I get it, for instance, that in the town of Westport, I worked with a long time, I wasn't in the planning and zoning, but 25 years ago, they stopped the use of new neon lighting and signs that are going up. Like you'll go down in Post Road and see Carvel, that's an old sign, you're allowed to have grandfathered in things. Or small neon in the window, but just to keep the town, even though it's growing and growing, to make it less obtrusive, less, seeming too busy or too polluting to go. And that's the kind of thing that they stopped 25 years ago, so that in the future, it wouldn't grow into some kind of mecca,
We've done that. We actually did the exact same thing with neon here. We grandfathered the old stuff, but, right now, we do have a regulation that prohibits the new neon.
So does these design standards sound like they will be informing like a PO, based on what you said about like rezoning and stuff like that? Informing like the POCD coming up, so do you have a recommendation on like how long we should give ourselves to be like a kind of a hard drafts by?
I think we haven't put the legwork in to hear from people about what they want. And that process, that's, a couple months of engagement with other commissions and inviting folks to meetings, whether you're gonna, and again, that process thing I was talking about earlier, is this gonna all happen during the commission's regular meetings? Or is the regulations committee going to then, start meeting again on the first Thursday at 5:30, and on March 7th, we're gonna have a subcommittee of this group get together and start talking about process and make a recommendation back to the big body to say, okay, now everybody, are we good? With this process. So if we were to do things only in these meetings, I think 6 months is almost pushing it. We see how long it's taken us. We've been talking about section 28 of the regulations for a very long time.
Yes,
And that's low hanging fruit. So this is complicated. So it's not gonna be overnight.
So in terms of, once again, timeline, POCD is, we said, July to December.
Right, it would begin in July to go out on the street, and it would need to be completed by the end of 2025.
So we'd have about, what?
14-month
year.
process for
Okay.
that. Yeah.
So we need to, based on like what these sound like, we kind of need to have these decided prior to finalizing a POCD, because it will, and just saying it'll significantly inform what that plan.
The two may inform each other, particularly the
Yeah.
part that I suggested about doing the downtown zone. That is a different piece that may have to be part of the, plan of conservation
Yeah,
development.
and I understand that.
And that piece, on the other hand, starting to gather data on design standards and starting to move that forward, we can do ahead of time. And that I think is it's something that could start. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we want to expedite something like downtown zone, because we have a centerpiece of it that's on the market that had 15 offers in the second day it was on. The Comcast building, everybody's looking at it for the cell phone tower, not the building. I inquired about like, if we could do anything for like height limitations, so we don't have some, 400-foot tower that becomes the beacon around here. But, you don't want somebody to put something in there and then change the rules afterwards and.
Yeah, and they don't have to follow the new.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
But it's a matter of you know, it is not a quick thing for us to change the rules now. That's why, you know, the design standards are something we can do
Over time.
but we can do it faster probably than changing
Oh.
the district to change, have a new zone district. In the current zone, we do have height standards. Okay,
Yes, we do.
and we do have, standards for cell towers in our regs. Okay, those are already in there.
They are, okay, cause I inquired about that.
Yeah, we did, because we were gonna put one here,
No, I-
remember, and we were gonna put one at the fire.
Yeah, I asked staff, and they're like, no, it's dictated by.
Yeah, we do have
federal laws.
design.
We have.
There's different levels, so there are elements of control within, that are local control, and there are some elements that go to the siting council, so that would depend, but I'd be surprised if we were gonna be seeing, you know, a 200-foot tower in the middle of downtown, and that would fly.
Well, I mean, they're
Uh,
getting $3,000 a month up the current tower just there,
There,
and they can add multiple antennas to it, or, you know, companies and stuff.
So it sounds like, should we, reinvigorate the regulations subcommittee?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because like Dylan said, Comcast building.
And it
what
sounds
we
like,
would need for that is, simply to announce that we're going to have a regulations committee meeting, what is it, the seventh?
it's the 7th at 5:30,
so March 7th would be.
March
or
7th,
7th at
5,
5:30.
to work on this. And to figure out, plan forward, not to do it in one night, okay?
How many
I
people?
saw
have
you
that?
No, I was looking at Ed because, you know, I made a
We're
joke
not
with him
gonna
the other
do
night,
it
he's
tonight,
gonna
but
get
we
me on the
got a
bill.
plan.
He's
for
gonna
what
get
we're
me on
gonna do.
Pittsburgh Commission for
And-
Bridges.
So we meet on March 7th, let's put that in, and then all of us who are able to be there.
So those have been virtual meetings since, whether we can either do it virtually and then do a Zoom meeting, we can do something in person. I'll look for a room and see if there's one available.
A Zoom meeting's fine with me.
Yeah. Either hybrid is fine, yeah, whatever.
Let's see.
Let's see what we can do.
Let's see I'll see what there's room availability,
Prior to 3/7 though, you think you distribute those examples, just,
we'll get some examples and then and the stuff from the town council and just sort of say, okay, here's, and I'll put together a little bit of a memo to sort of say, let's frame a conversation. I think the process we use here is important, and so it's easy to say, okay, something is selling and there's this immediate thing that we're reacting to, but I think the bigger picture is, well, this is a long game.
Yeah.
These regulations are intended to be in place for decades,
Right,
and so we want to make sure we get it right.
right, and I've spent a lot of time correcting regs because we always have unintended consequences. So you do it and then you have to realize you're probably gonna have to go back and fix it. But you still do the best you can and keep it moving forward. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next item. Brian, you had a request for us?
Yeah, the town council is looking to appoint someone to the River Cog Regional Agricultural Council.
What did you say, sorry?
No, I didn't hear what you said. There's an open spot in the River Cog Regional Agricultural Council, which is to promote agriculture-friendly land use and municipal policies. So if anybody is interested in that, please send your interest to your chair, who will send it to us.
Larry and I just joined River.
Larry wants to join.
Yeah,
the
we
Pittsburgh
did,
Bridge
no, we're not in
Commission.
the.
Yeah, they're on a different part.
We're
of
on a
Yeah, they're
different
in a different.
we're in a different part.
Yeah, you're off the hook.
Yes.
Yeah, we're on that
Where
zone,
can I-
right?
I got you on everything. You're the
Yeah.
chairman.
The regional facility.
And
The important thing here, though, is, by having somebody on there, we would be, aware of, funding opportunities for agriculture that might come to the town. So it is important that we have somebody involved in this if possible.
How about you, Zach?
I think that Cynthia was about to say,
Let's ask a question.
Yeah.
Where can somebody go to look at this entire position and time requirements and all that good stuff.
I will send that information to your chair to distribute to your council.
Fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
You're patting my back like I'm raising my hand for it.
How many times have I raised this hand?
Okay, now we go to old business. And it's the, our friend, section 28. We're looking at, structures, storage and display. A new draft has been distributed. I'm trying to find which file that is here. Draft section 28, what do you know? So this one, staff has included a language trying to capture everything that we've said so far and we've discussed so far, and what there is before us is are the sections that are being modified. Okay, if you look down near the bottom, they've added the sections that we have yet to modify. But what we want to post in, is the areas, and what we want to try to do is move forward with a public hearing on the, parts that we are comfortable with. And personally, I think that we've done a good job on these sections, and I'm comfortable with all of them. The one area that needs to be, discussed, I think, is the incidental retail. Is that still?
Yeah, so that was, so the next iteration, so we broke section 28 up into 3 sort of chunks to address, and the next section, commercial and residential uses, I think would be where the incidental retail.
Okay,
piece.
so
So
we don't.
that highlighted area in gray, it's in there just so people didn't wonder, like, why are we missing a section when these came to you? When it would be published for public consumption, that wouldn't be presented to the public at this
Okay.
stage.
That's
So
fine.
28.2 and down are not gonna be, only 28.2. Oh, what's that?
Only J and K would be excluded from the next round of public notice for
Okay.
potential adoption for this language.
Right.
So I included it here just because in our draft, and it kind of messes up the formatting if we take it out, but we would be clear. on-
What you have is the excerpt. It's
Yeah.
just the part of section 28 that would be going to public hearing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I don't have a problem with, sending this to public hearing. Did anybody else have issues or concerns with what was in it?
Yeah.
I think it reflects what we've discussed so far.
Motion.
Go ahead.
Make a motion to move this section 28 revisions to public hearing.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
What?
Thank you, this is great. You guys did a wonderful job.
Okay, in that case, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? Staying, motion carried. We can go to public hearing next month. Okay?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Because there's a lot of people that gotta.
Yeah, and that's important to get this moving. Okay, committee reports. We don't have any committees at the moment, but we will have, regulations committee report next month.
All right.
Correspondence and bills. Did we have any?
No.
Okay, so that gets us to adjournment, I believe. Did I miss something? My page flip.
I have a question before we adjourn.
Yes, go ahead.
So, in the way the regulations committee is gonna work out is, I'm kind of looking to what's gonna happen. We're gonna send out this stuff, to review, and then it'll be set a conversation plan. Are we gonna focus on a specific regulation week 1, or are we gonna be, like, what's the flow?
Well, the first flow will have to be, figuring out, really it will be figuring out what we want to do.
I see.
Okay, so the first item will have to be sort of mapping that out. And what Abby had suggested was bringing some talking points for us.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep. And again, I think, the important thing, the regulations committee is an advisory aspect back to the commission as a whole. So in order to move this project really forward, if you're gonna say, okay, here's the process we want to use, commit, and then at the next at the commission's meeting on the 11th, the question is, okay, does the full body agree that this is the direction of the order of the priorities we should be taking? Right, and so if we can get to that point and then sort of say, here are the marching orders for staff to go out and bring you back additional information, we can talk about what you're gonna need next in order to advance the conversation, so.
Okay,
Cool. Okay,
and, if anybody wants to volunteer to be the chair of the regulations committee, we can deal with that at the regulations committee meeting. I will be there, but just so you know, I don't have to be the chair of it.
Mr. Chairman, are we also gonna cover the sign regulations that I brought
We
up?
might as well bring that into the regs meeting too, yeah.
You're talking about.
Because that actually fits in the design standards.
What's that?
That sort of goes with the
Yeah,
whole design view, yeah,
okay.
thank you. Okay, we are now at adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Take a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Jay got the second in. Discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Okay, we're adjourned at 8:21. Thank you.
I have a question.